Hi. As we approach the end of a calendar year, many of us have the practice of looking back on the year that was, reflecting on the highs and lows of the year, and shape our dreams and aspirations for the coming year. At Software People Stories, we are running a special series of conversations with people on their own approaches as well as practices and stories of how their thinking has changed over the years. Today, I'm in conversation with S Gopalan, my colleague from PM Power and an industry veteran. He prefers to be called Gopal. In this conversation, he shares that reflections are good and how his own perspective on annual cycles of appraisal and feedback or half yearly cycles have changed over time. That he is not fond of setting medium term or long term goals such as losing weight over the next 3 months, 6 months, etc., but rather prefers to take up things that would help make changes in his daily routines. And how taking micro goals per day could possibly be accumulated and sometimes completed as a binge activity. He talks about the benefit of making commitments public so that there is pressure from others also to nudge you towards your goal. And how his approaches are different when reflecting on two different contexts that he is actively associated with. One, a loosely structured team, such as PM Power, and a more structured team with tight timelines, which is global automation. And what we as coaches need to think about differently and about tools that will help us deliver more impactful engagements. He talks about the value of reflections, at least to make one feel secure and confident about the future. And that you should have a plan, but be open to modifying it and adapting dynamically as you make progress. Listen on. Yeah. Hi, Gopal. Welcome back to the Software People Stories.
It's always a pleasure, Chef, talking with you. And especially these sessions have been very good because it makes me think, which I normally don't do.
Actually, this time I thought I will use these sessions to think a little more. Because one of the challenges that I've been having, I've not been able to find a reasonable an effective answer for myself, is around this time of the year when many people get into a reflection mode as to whatever happened, and then into a planning mode, saying what are some New Year resolutions we can make, or what are some things that will happen, how things will change overnight, pretty much between December 31st and January 1st. It's all about hope, I guess. So the few broad questions that I had were about how do people do this or take this? Is this even something that is worth doing? And what are some practices that have helped, or that in general, like New Year resolutions, they say for things like reducing weight or going to a gym and all that, actually doesn't last very long. And if this keeps happening every year, but still we do that, right? So I wanted to understand what your experience has been and any insights that you might have, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I personally feel this reflection is good. It's like I had this feeling towards appraisal systems. I used to be a very strong critique of the whole appraisal process and feedback and stuff like that. Because I used to say that, feedback is instantaneous, and as and when you feel it, you should say it, which is definitely something that I think has its merit. So does appraisal session, because what happens when you sit down and look back at how the 6 months you're being able to observe a person perform, you get a better cogency in your observations. Otherwise, it's mostly reactions. And so it definitely makes you think whether that person was actually that way or whether other patterns were there. Whole lot of things. It throws light into your own observations that you might have made earlier into a different shape. So similarly, I think even when it comes to, I'm not a great believer in making these resolutions which have like goals. Like if you took the same example of losing weight, I am
Mm,
not fond of setting goal of saying you should lose 5 kilos in 3 months or 5 kilos in 6 months. I don't believe in that kind of resolutions, but I definitely think rather I prefer to do. I don't think there is one right way, but the way I prefer to do is what are the changes that I can make on my daily schedule or regular approach to achieve something that I really want to do. It need not be a specific goal. For example, let's say I don't decide saying that uh, like a simple example is instead of deciding that I will read a book every month,
mm,
what I would rather decide is I will try and read half an hour every day
mm,
and see if it's the same goal, but just the way. So I don't know whether it's a resolution, but I believe making those daily changes and altering your own schedule is easier to, for me, it's much easier to accept and develop rather than because maybe I am a procrastinator. So if I said I'll finish one book every month, maybe like on only towards the end of the month I'll start reading the book so I can finish it. That may be something that I have a weakness to do. I
mm,
kind of, and I don't sit down and do so much planning also. So I prefer to do this daily routine modifications for me to do well. So if you take 2024, what we want to do or anything like that, I think the direction and what are the actions that we need to take, which will culminate into something in 2024, is how I would do it. So I do feel it is very important because it helps you do a lot of course correction and remove something that you have been trying but it has not been yielding result. Then you kind of say, okay, maybe I need to do it either differently or not. There's no point pursuing. So
mm,
I do think that it happens, but I'm not so, what do you call that, religious about it. I just do it. And actually I get triggered when I see these things posting saying that I made this resolution and I read somebody saying the year went by like this. Then I start, I don't do it on my own.
mm.
That's what I notice is my general trait when it comes to these reflections.
So a couple of things. I liked when you said that rather than saying I'll finish a book and say I'll read every day, which is the way I read it was you're trying to create a discipline and a habit of doing something. And that's definitely a change in the behavior. But if there is no goal to finish a book, you may read half an hour. But then sometimes I get into this. That is why I kind of stopped buying books. Because what I realized was that earlier, you're in the airport, somewhere else, you pick up a book because it is interesting, then you read it. By the time you come back after the trip, you've not finished it yet. And then you say, okay, it is always there, we'll finish it. So I said, rather than buying books, let me borrow books from a library. That way, at least there is that guilt feeling. So having some timeline as also as a goal, whether it is in a half an hour or so, uh, has that been a problem for you in terms of particularly reading or finishing? If it is more about the input or what you would do versus what you want to complete or achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, it happens, Shiv. Honestly, I also have quite a few books that I don't go back to after doing like one third, two third.
Mm,
I justify it to myself by saying, okay, well, I knew the trend and I know if it's going to end this way, so it's okay and all that. But it's
mm,
actually lack of discipline when it comes to not finishing the books. But
mm,
it's more like most of the books that I've got hooked on to, normally I finish reading. In fact,
mm,
the thing that I notice is that I will say half an hour every day.
mm,
Then I will tell that if I miss one day, I will compensate by another half an hour the next day. Then it will kind of pile up sometimes. Then the weekend I will come do it. That time, what happens is if you have done 1 hour also, if there is a little bit left, then you say, okay, I will finish this. So that's one way I have overcome that problem. But yes, that happens. In fact, it is worse with this. What after OTTs have come, no? Even programs on TV and all that, I tend to see for some time and I say, okay, I think I know, but I'll come back to this later. And I put,
Yeah.
so if you really go to my TV and you switch on and look at my viewership, it will say a lot of things will be in resume,
Okay.
because I would have seen 20 minutes of a 30-minute program, 30 minutes of a 1 hour, like that. There are a lot of things. That problem is there. I think it is good to have a combination. Like I said, this works for me better than setting a goal, because I tend to say that the one thing that I keep failing is writing.
Mm.
Every time I make this thing saying every day I will write half an hour,
Mhm.
I just, for some reason, the day I make that decision, maybe for about 3, 4 days, I will write some half a page, 1 page, and stuff like that.
Mm.
Then it kind of it goes into the back burner. I still don't know why it is, but yeah, I have that problem also. So I think you're right. If you have a target saying that and you do the changes together, it may be a better idea. But
Mm.
you should put that pressure onto yourself. I think sometimes I tell people, make your commitments public. See,
Mm.
the thing is, I set a goal and only I know about the goal.
Mm.
It's easy to kind of come up with reasons and not really pursue it. So I normally try to tell some close people saying, I want to do this by this time or something like that.
Mm.
Then that will act as a pressure on me, saying that, what if the guy asks, what did you do about it? So let me do it. So I do that trick also. Every now and then I expose what I decided I want to do. And it's a positive thing. Many of my friends can push me saying,
Mm.
do it. So yeah, that's true. That I also have that same issue of not finishing books in me also. Yeah.
I also have similar experience both with watching OTTs and also these resolutions being made public. But then the effect on me has been, or the impact has been a little different. What happens is when you find a lot of these resume watching, then first you have to decide which one to continue or first. And then many times, if it is after a gap, I would have forgotten what happened. So you have to
So
rewatch
start with the beginning.
something.
Yeah.
So on this public
Yeah.
commitment, you also know this person, Narali. And a few years ago, I said that I want to write a book. Then he said, like, I will start bugging you. He used to regularly do that. Initially, it used to be, every month. Then it became every quarter. But after a couple of years, he gave up because there is not much progress beyond probably the first chapter. So I think, yeah, it also requires some inherent motivation to do it. Uh,
Yeah.
some,
I don't know. Yeah. I remember you many years ago, you wanted to write something called Software Kundalini, right?
yeah,
I don't remember how long ago. Maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
still
That's
there.
true. Yeah.
A related thing. See, you obviously wear multiple hats. And if I just take two of those in a similar context, one is about PM power and the other is global automation. Uh, I mean, at the cost of oversimplifying or this thing, generalizing, PM power is probably a fairly loosely knit and a fluid, flexible kind of an operation, whereas you require more discipline, more deadlines, more process orientation, all that for global. So when you start reflecting on these, uh, I mean, how are you able to either have a same approach or different approaches in thinking about those contexts and even looking forward?
Oh, okay. I actually don't think I treat that in such scientifically isolated manner. I just work, I think, the same way.
Mm.
You actually stumped me. I never thought about it in that way.
Mm.
But what has happened is in global, because it's more than 27 years now. We are about 27 years old. And there is a lot of what you call the cohesion in the senior group
Mm.
as to how this works and all those kind of things. Lot of good work, good foundation laid by people from the earlier days has actually solidified the general thing. It's like do as Romans do when in Rome kind of thing. So when people come, within a few months, they generally get to know how this happens and all that. So even if you take just within global, there is this data operation, which is private equity analytics that we do. And then there is this other software development operation. Even between the two, if I look at it, software development, and then you have PM power. So in PM power, we don't have deadlines at all. I mean, in the sense that it is coaching, schedule based and stuff like that. We don't have a development delivery kind of a thing, right? And then in software, we have like delivery schedule and you have periodic deliverables, and then there is targets, and then you go. And then if you take the analytics team, it's almost a daily deliverable kind of thing. So I noticed that there is a difference in the kind of attention these things seek. So pretty much since I am luckily not too deeply involved in the data operations of data analytics, I don't feel the pressure, but that team does that. But I do notice the kind of interventions required, or the type of questions or suggestions or consulting that is sought from the teams is quite varied. I think I have this tendency to just react when that thing comes. Then you get into that mode. You don't think about the other one. I haven't actually, until you asked this question, I didn't compare them as to how I am behaving. I knew that these were different, but I don't think I had actually consciously said, this is the way I am doing this is the way I am doing this, or whatever. So it's mainly sought interventions from any one of these teams. I just kind of act accordingly, become with them, and then don't compare it with something else. But it does become an issue when two of these teams, particularly software and say analytics, when they discuss operational procedures or things like that, there's a huge difference in the way they approach. So sometimes sitting in the middle and to come up with a compromise that will be acceptable to both of them and not make them feel under stress is always interesting, and it takes some amount of effort. In fact, for example, if you take this year, we completely gave up work from home because during COVID, we took up work from home, and then we said we'll continue it as an option. But what happens in a smaller team is that it becomes extremely difficult to operationally manage. So initially, the data analytics team said, no, I don't think we can. The management of the team said, we can't support this. People suddenly not showing up and all that. So, but software was a little more comfortable. Then when the new people started joining the software group, they realized it's not working too well. So we have almost gone back to full work from office model now. Whereas in PM Power, we have operated only from working in every different location on a regular way.
A couple of more dimensions or layers to this. See, one, you talked about the analytics team pretty much working on a daily kind of a schedule, and software development also has milestones, deliverables, and so on, which I'm assuming is probably going to be the monthly or weekly, quarterly type of thing. And of course, PM Power is a different model. So is there any sanctity for the period of looking ahead or planning? Because when we say New Year resolution, saying this year I want to do that, but that year is still a long time away, 12 months, 5 days, whatever. At that time, we feel that, okay, 1 year is a good time. Or some of the conventions that are there, meeting 1 hour. What is so sanctity? I mean, what is so sacred about 1 hour? Can it be a 20-minute meeting or a 50-minute meeting or a half an hour meeting, stuff like that? So your concept of the maybe a unit concept of time, what is something that is reasonable? And then I'll ask the second question after this.
Actually, the way I look at, let's say, if you ask me what is it that you will do towards 2024, Let me just state what kind of things that we are looking at. See, if you take what 2023 did to the whole industry, anything associated with technology, this LLMs coming and shaking the whole scene up. And now, the way we are imagining it fictionally, how this AI is going to do, I'm leaving all that out. But in actual reality, you know that there are a lot of applications. It's like how when the cloud came, you knew that it's not that everything is going to go to the cloud, but it is going to definitely shift the landscape, and a lot of exploitation of the cloud infrastructure is going to happen. You knew that for sure. Similarly, I think there's going to be a lot of exploitation of LLM that will happen in the coming. The way even we are thinking about software and all that, I believe will take a huge shift. In fact, one of the things that I discussed with the software team was your idea of Quizall acting in conjunction with such engines for evaluation and things like that. So I think in each one of these, there is going to be a different impact. So for something like PM Power in the consulting space, I think that the model completely shifting is going to be a while, but I think we need to start preparing for an assisted model, like a tool that is a lot more smart and which will actually reduce the amount of routine thinking that we need to do and routine exercise. So, that kind of approach will happen. So what can we do is what I think I can do, rather than, operationally we need to look at sales pipeline and those. I'm not saying that as a major planning action. I think this is more in that I find that it is the same thing that we did 20 years ago. Can we drill more into the same account and get more business? Can we go sideways? It's the standard stuff that we do. But I think the shift in the paradigm is what we need to start learning. And not only the tools, I think even as coaches, we need to start believing that we can use a tool like that. It's like I remember when we came up for products for private equity, GPs, they were very happy doing the work with the spreadsheets. They didn't really want to do any software-based a tool that is tuned for their action, because they felt their whole power is not really being utilized. So like that, we shouldn't have a problem, is what I think there we need to do, both in software and in data analytics. The impact of this during 2024 is what we have been discussing, saying that we need to get people exposed to this as a platform. It's like suddenly relational database is there, or there is no SQL, something like that comes, then you need to prepare for how you build solutions that leverage that aspect. Like that, I think we need to start thinking differently. Even software systems that we build, architectures need to take that into account. And it's not clear in my mind, but I see a shift in that. So the planning window, if you ask me, is whether it should be quarter or I think, like I said about even personal, you should have a larger direction in which you want to go, but your planning should be what do we do now for the next 3 months to 6 months in each one of these things is I think is a more meaningful window. I don't think to be sure about what we will do 6 months from now is very difficult in my opinion. We can be sure that we want to do this and it is going to take 3 to 6 months. Anything significant we do, it's not going to be 1 week, 2 weeks, it's going to be 3 to 6 months, but we need to start reviewing. So, this whole thing that agile practices is going to become the way. I mean, in principle and in spirit, that is how I think everything will happen in the coming future. So I don't know whether I can answer that question precisely, saying what is the time unit that you would take for planning. I think we should mix Japanese direction and long-term vision with American quarter-wise planning. That's what I think we should do.
Yeah. The reason for that question was also, if you take a couple of contexts, see, when COVID happened, between say March and June, I think by June, pretty much all organizations somehow figured out what is the best way for them to work in a dispersed manner. A sudden dispersion happened, right? Both tech as well as non-tech organizations. Right? More, a bit closer home, last October, I think, if I remember right, I had this podcast conversation recorded with a stealth company working on LLMs and a very specific vertical application. And it sounded, at least the founder's belief, that this is going to take off and this has a lot of potential. And he was specifically targeting these huge defense RFP responses, where you know, the companies spend millions of dollars just responding to RFPs. And there is so much of proprietary content that each company has, which they want to leverage, because based on what worked in the past, etc. At the same time, it is competitive; it can't be too different, and so on. So after recording, they said, "Yeah, we'll publish it," and the publishing date was January. That is probably the first, I think, podcast this year, which we also published as a video. In between, ChatGPT happened at last November or so, and
Nobody saw it coming.
till that time, and suddenly in the next 3 months, you see, early this year, and even now, there are a lot of these small applications that ride on ChatGPT. I mean, the underlying engine is still one of those, but then they've been able to create, I would say probably not in a condescending way, Mickey Mouse applications. Something that probably does some specific thing, but then leverages something that is already there. So, which means even companies that were not looking at this space all now want to have something saying chatbot, my chatbot, AI enabled. AI became everywhere. Okay. So again, when it comes to planning and timelines, if usually this year-end reflection or the New Year resolutions and all that is more on the personal side. Okay. Because companies do have their own cycles of planning and long-term plan, medium-term plan, and all that. So when you mix as an individual, your professional roles, commitments, expectations, etc., and some of the personal priorities, which also are likely to change from time to time, how does that make this whole process more complicated? So ultimately, the question is it worth doing the reflection?
I think doing the reflection makes us feel a little more secure. You are right, because the dynamics of the various things, like you say, personally, things happen which you don't predict, good or bad. They keep happening, and then you don't anticipate some of the bad that might happen, and you think your time is fully available, and you say, okay, I want to do this and this, and a lot of this get compromised. But I don't know, maybe it warrants a huge risk planning exercise. It becomes too boring, I think, beyond a point.
Yeah.
I think I do think that you should have a plan so that you can keep going and see, but always be open to modifying that or making. I mean, I'm not saying make a mockery of the plan that we did, but that's why I think the direction is very important. And then you keep tweaking your plan towards getting towards that end in ways that are most appropriate and time bound. Tactically, you may need to do certain changes. For example, we assume certain inflows and certain cash flow positions based on the business that has been going on, and most of it is pretty steady or whatever. And then you say, so much we are going to be investing, and so we can deploy so much resource into something. But suddenly, a lot of unexpected things happen. For example, some client might just decide that he's not going to continue, or some loss in revenue or something like that happens, or some key people are around whom you put some plan together are not available for a variety of reasons. It will pull you down a little bit, but you should not. I think that you should be agile enough to just shake it off and then start what next and then see how we can go from there. Yeah, but I still think you need something to go by, otherwise it will be very difficult. Like I said, I don't have very concrete, things. You have components and it's like buffet. Make them available, take what you want and keep going, whatever that suits you. That way I think it will work. But but I don't think we can just give up. Not that anything bad will happen, but you may lose sight of some of the things that are happening. For example, unless you start preparing, getting to understand how to work with some new technology is not going to happen unless you start intentionally spending some resources in that area. So for that, you need those things, but it may not happen the way you want. Yeah, but then that's life.
I think one takeaway for me from what you said is that while in the work context, yeah, all these benefits of preparing for something, and they also say, this failing to plan is planning to fail and all that. That's the other extreme. But on the
Yeah,
personal side, I think this whole planning or the expectation of looking forward to something, either changing or achieving and all that, I think gives more confidence to oneself and also, more importantly, hope.
yeah.
However bad things might be, or however things might have gone not as per plan earlier, there is a hope that we'll be able to do that. And then that itself probably is able to drive us to make progress.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, it actually gives us better ideas. I mean, when
Mm.
you get up and that excitement will be there, oh, I'm going to try this, try that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think mind adjusts very easily. If something doesn't work, he says, okay, let's go for something else. I
Something else.
don't think it just gets pulled down. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. On that note, Gopal, I think it has been a great conversation. And then I think at least I will attempt one more plan for next year at the end of the year. And see how it goes.
Same here, same here. It's only 60, 70 times that I've done it. So it's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Chef. Thank
Thanks,
you. It
Gopal.
was a pleasure. Thank you, pleasure. Pleasure, Chef. Thank you.